Hello everyone and welcome back. It's Zakiziel here, and tonight I'll be reacting to Yarrick the Early Years 10,000 Subscriber Special Part 1 by Old Man Reacts. As always, I highly recommend that you check out Old Man's channel if you're not doing so already. He makes great content. I've reacted to his entire Mistakes of the Emperor and 5-Unit Lore series, unless another video has come out recently that I don't know about. But yeah, his content is both very entertaining and informative, and I've been enjoying reacting to it. And as always, there'll be a link to the original video in the description box below. And without further ado, let us see what he has to say about the old man. Well, I imagine he...
Warbugs, it's time. Time to talk.
Yeah, I imagine, by the way, that he has a lot to say about Yarrick, considering how much he's done.
Talk about one of the greatest figures in the entire width and breadth of the immense sea of lore that we so love and enjoy. In a collection of works that details deeds of the mighty, it's easy to remember certain names when they are the focal point of a series, or a remembrance of a singular importance. We are used to stories of the strong, the brave, the meek, and the desperate, in times that are dark without question, and thankfully beyond any dredging of our worst imaginations. We hear about the brave, the dutiful, the noble, and the loyal because the setting is filled with examples of just that. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and the galaxy blazes with the lights of billions who have those traits in abundance. We are not here to talk about them today, however. We're talking about another trait. A trait that is normally reserved for the titans of the setting. A trait that makes the subject of today's Voxcast stand apart. There are many in the setting who have had this trait, but not like him.
I wonder if it's going to be how enduring he is with his strength of will, because Yarrick got his arm ripped off by an orc, and then killed that orc, and took the said orc's power claw to replace his severed arm.
He is not a space marine, ceremonially armored and trained from childhood with close to 1,000 brothers that stand at his side. He is not a Primarch, near immortal and demigod-like in appearance and skill. He is not close to any of them. He is just human. Not psychically enhanced, or subject of extensive biometric implants, nor is he rich beyond the dreams of Midas. He is just human. He is a product of training and study, of leadership and constant testing. And when it comes to the heroes of the Imperium, he stands at chest tight among titans. He stands in a place reserved for Primarchs and Chapter Masters, saints and some of the greatest generals to exist. He stands. Perseverance is the ability to stand, to continue, despite any hardship.
Oh, so it was how enduring he is then. Nice. Also, I'm always glad whenever people within the Imperial Guard are to get some love, and shows that, the normal, quote unquote, man or woman in the setting is in fact more than just cannon fodder. And I've said it multiple times before, but I just enjoy the idea of quote unquote normal people, in the fact that, as Old Man said, he's not a genetically altered super soldier, or like the Astartes, or basically a demigod like the Primarchs. He's just a man. And there's something about the fact that he has accomplished all that he has, is in spite of that, the average human is horrendously outclassed by many of the threats that they face in the 40k universe.
To sacrifice. Perseverance is the ability to take injury, to take risk, and to stand alone if needed. perseverance, to hold on no matter the cost, to endure, to stand against a mountain, to hold back a tsunami, and inspire others to do what should be impossible.
That holding back a tsunami thing is especially apt considering that the greenskins are called the Green Tide for a reason.
Both piety and hate echo in his every word. He should not hold rank here, not to the degree he does. He is merely a commissar in the Imperial Guard. Yet to the humans at this war council, and the citizens of Armageddon, he is the Old Man, a beloved hero of the Second War 57 years ago. Not just a hero, the hero.
Welcome as I finally dive into the origins, the life, and the legend of one of the greatest heroes of the Imperium. Join me as I talk about the hero of Armageddon, Old Baali, the Old Man, the undisputed Lord Commissar Thunder Chad Von I'm McLoving it himself, Commissar Sebastian Yarrick!
I love how he introduced Yarrick like he's a wrestler.
General Medicaid warning. The views expressed in the following Voxcast are listed as fanboy extremists. Consumption has been known to result in rapid
Sister
screaming,
Hospitality
violent
Weasel.
outbursts, and mass devouring of bacon. In rare cases, some subjects have been known to start a YouTube channel dedicated to screaming about people and places in 40K, and waking up their long-suffering wife while roaring about how the Tau should be exterminated. If you find yourself wanting to build a claw arm out of a car engine or attach a laser pointer to your eye, or if you find yourself attempting to attack a shrubbery with a saber because you believed it to be a form of sapient fungus, please seek medical help immediately.
The story of Sebastian Yarrick begins with a youth, as every story does. Sebastian Varden, our
Just attacking a shrub, think it's sentient fungus. Which, yeah, that's what the orcoids are. And although, that does bring up a particular mental image of someone potentially also deciding to charge said shrub with a bayonet as well.
Bass, as he was called at the time, was the child of parents of some measurable wealth. Born on Teos 3, Bass' life changed at the age of 7 when both of his parents were killed. Essentially, his mom and dad had pissed off the wrong sort of people, and that sort of people had decided they would be best removed from active census. His parents' estate was swallowed by the bureaucratic machine of the Imperium, and young Bass was sent to live with
So his parents were excommunicated from life.
his sole surviving blood relative. His life at that point was a life of relative ease and luxury by Imperial standards, but young Bass was about to get the rudest awakening possible. Bass was put on a train and sent to a nearby hive city to be raised by his maternal grandfather in the small outlying town of Three Rivers. By the way, Three Rivers only has one river, unironically. The fact that his
I wonder if it used to have more rivers, but they potentially, say, dried up due to pollution or something, or the other two rivers literally being destroyed by some cataclysmic event. But that aside, though, the fact that he being described as living a life of relative luxury by Imperial citizen standards, that makes sense considering that the average Imperial citizen, to my knowledge, can only really look forward to slaving away every single day for their entire lives in a factory.
His life was going to radically change was so obvious from the first encounter with his grandfather, it was stunning. Imagine, if you will, being shipped off at the age of 7 to someone who has the personality of a paper shredder and the patience of phosphorus. Scarred with a bionic replacement for a leg, he found...
Also, for those who don't know, white phosphorus, yeah, that's the stuff that you keep it in oil or water, because the instant the oxygen touches that, it goes up in flames.
His grandfather held nothing but contempt for him. Bast's grandfather was a brutal man, an ex-Imperial Guard veteran who had lost more than just a leg. Known as the Sarge, Bast's grandfather made a living by being a local enforcer for a man named Sheridan, whose influence Bast never really understood.
So his grandfather sounds like a real hard ass then.
Essentially, Sheridan was a local crime lord, and Bast's dear old granddaddy was the guy who showed up with a 2x4 to remind you that you owed by beating the rest of the stuff distracting you out of your head.
So essentially, yeah, the guy who makes sure that you paid your taxes.
What's clear is that Sheridan not only paid Sarge as an enforcer, he also held an intense and deep respect and downright admiration for the old veteran. Bast would eventually find out from Sheridan that not only was his grandfather a veteran of several campaigns, to many, the Sarge was a war hero. Bast was enrolled in the local school and instantly attracted the attention of a bully named Craven. Craven, what the hell? What kind of cruel parents named their kid a synonym for coward? Bast, prior to his new life,
I don't know, maybe the parent was a Skaven. Sounds like he might have been related to Tretch Craventail.
in Three Rivers, had never had a reason to be afraid. Craven and a group of boys gave him a reason. Three Rivers might not be a rich place, but it did offer value menu beatdowns by the score. Bast was bullied mercilessly, and then beaten mercilessly, all on his first day at the new school. Bast didn't know how to defend himself, certainly not against a group of boys all larger and stronger than him, not even verbally. He didn't even know how to talk trash. He never even landed a physical or an emotional punch. After being beaten to the point where he was almost sure they were gonna kill him, Bast laid in the street. He learned a hard lesson as he lay bleeding. No one was coming to help. No one cared. Come on down to live in Three Rivers. Meet the locals. Bleed in the streets. Bast's grandfather patched him up and told him if he ever got tired of being...
Ah, yes. Sounds like the kind of place is that a certain Yakuza would love to visit. Or maybe a greenskin.
being a victim, to let him know. After another beating, and when Bast was being bandaged by the Sarge, Bast confronted his grandfather about his time in the Guard. Sarge lashed out at Bast, and it's the only time that we learn that Bast's grandfather has been dishonorably discharged from his regiment, been stripped of all of his medals, and had received 50 lashes.
Oh?
The fourth time Craven's group assaulted Bast, he came home with a stab wound from a box cutter. Bast had tried to defend himself yet again, and this time he actually landed a shot. The stab wound was his reward. He had walked home, alone, bleeding, with no one to step in and help him. At the age of 7, Bast had lost his parents, his home, his security, and anything that could be remotely considered comfort. When he got home, he demanded Sarge teach him, and teach him the Sarge did. To say the Sarge was a good teacher kind of glosses over the point that the Sarge rewarded failure by beating him like it was a religious ceremony. Sarge was a brutal, relentless trainer, demanding nothing but perfection. Bast was physically trained in simple weapons and taught how to fight. Within only a few months, Craven and his
Ah, so very exacting standards then. And which reminds me of Perturabo, to be honest. And when held to such high standards, it's usually what happens is either A, the person breaks because they can't and hold up under the pressure of such high expectations, or they actually make it, and you end up with someone who is incredibly competent at what they do. And given what I do know about Yarrick, he definitely became the incredibly competent kind.
He steered clear from Bast, with the youth apparently not seen as so easy a target anymore. It might have started making him just a little bit concerned that at 7 Bast went from soft and pudgy to built like a Rottweiler with the attitude of one after direct injection of hydrochloric acid. More than Craven, more than anyone else, Bast began to hate his grandfather, which the Sarge not only told him would happen, but actively encouraged. Bast would go past the point of sheer exhaustion in his training, only to keep going out of sheer spite. Suddenly, out of the blue, after months of staying away from Bast,
Yeah, so the fact that honey badger is pretty accurate then to what it sounds like Yarrick became under the training. Just the kind like you don't want to deal with that.
Craven and his group ambushed him. When they drew knives, Bass drew his own and told them to try it. This time, Bass wasn't only ready to hold his own, he completely dominated. One of the boys got slashed, another received a broken nose for his time, and as for the rest of Craven's group, they ran away. Bass stood square with the bully who had tormented him. Bass decided now to live up to his name. After realizing that he had well and truly fucked around and found out, he told Bass the truth. The first time Craven's group had attacked Bass, it earned Craven's family a visit from the Sarge. But it wasn't to hurt him, it was to pay him. Sarge had hired Craven and his friends after Bass' first beating, not only to psychologically abuse him, but to attack him only days after he was fully healed. The Yarrick family reunion must be a banging good time.
Yeah, imagine going, gee, Granddad, thanks for hiring the local bullies to regularly beat me. So I'd end up as the incredibly determined in person I am today. Or at least that's what I like to imagine it becomes like. Although probably with less sarcasm considering the grandfather's temperament.
Every time Bass had been assaulted by a mob of boys that had been paid for by his own grandfather, Craven's business savvy was finally rewarded with a kick to the balls and then one to the face. Bass confronted his grandfather, considered shanking him, but realized his grandfather had done something for him that he could never have done for himself. Bass was no longer afraid. Instead of attacking his grandfather or running away, Bass stayed and continued learning from him. Every day he trained, until one day, 2 years later, when Bass was 10, the sky was shattered by the contrails of an invader. The lovely world of Talos 3 was visited by numerous large and loud guests of the fungal persuasion. When the orcs invaded Talos 3, Sarge was recalled into the guard, and Bass himself was left in Three Rivers. Bass soon became the
yes, the boys is arrived for a proper war.
Only survivor in Three Rivers. When the orcs occupied the ruins of the city they had destroyed, Bass survived by using Sarge's survival techniques. He set up drops, used the rooftops to move, and had multiple safe houses throughout the city. He killed several Gretchen during the occupation that got too close to him, or got caught into the several traps that he had set. Note, this was not a one-man guerrilla campaign. This was simply a 10-year-old trying his best to survive. Bass' entire existence was arranged around this singular goal. He covered himself in orc feces to mask his scent, and I don't know how effective it is to cover yourself in orc feces, but I know it worked. He used darkness as his ally. He learned his occupiers' habits. His entire goal was simply to survive, but his situation was beginning to grow desperate. He was beginning to view Gretchen that he was shanking as a reliable food source once the local KFC was destroyed. After months of occupation,
Well, I guess technically they do make a good food source. I mean, orcs will eat them. I also kind of wonder, since the various orcoids are part fungus and part animal life, in some fusion of the two, I wonder if someone would say that it's technically vegan to eat orcs.
he was the only human alive in the city, surviving off any food he could scrounge. Bass' life had collapsed down to the sheer basics, but that was until an orc convoy came into Three Rivers. It was a convoy of speed freaks, transporting cages of slaves. A tattooed boy in a cage caught his eye, who had the same defiance that he felt as he looked at the orcs. Bass hadn't spoke to anyone in months, hadn't had a friend in years. He wanted to get to this other kid and free him, but what to do? Well, the first opportunity presented itself rather quickly when orcs did orc things. You see, orcs are anarcho-capitalists, and whenever two large ones get in close proximity, their combined mass violates the non-aggression pact, so hands are gonna get thrown. The biggest orc from the convoy decided the biggest one currently in town had violated the terms of the agreement by existing in range of his fist. When the two largest orcs faced off, Bass made his first attempt to free the boy, but was stopped by the almost panicked reaction of the other prisoners. Bast elected to return later that night. He didn't exactly know why he was so urgent to release the prisoners, in particular the boy, but
Perhaps because the boy was something of a kindred spirit, given that he saw that same sort of determination in this boy, and it reminded him of himself in a way. That's just my guess, at least.
it came from a need to be around someone of his own age. He needed
Oh,
companionship, as the only voice he had heard that was human in the last few months had been the voice of his grandfather in his own head. Later that night, he tried again, this time successfully freeing the tattooed boy, who was a psyker named Yarrick. The other prisoners began to carefully make their way out of the shattered administratum building that had been their slave pit, having to climb out the building to reach the rooftops. Now, in any crisis situation, there is always a constant. We all know this person because we all know someone that's going to do it. Introduce Moron A, who is going to be doing exactly what's needed to make a bad situation catastrophic. As Sarek made it to the top, Moron A began to panic and began screaming and shouting, waking up every sleeping orc in a 10-mile radius, who promptly started massacring the civilians as Sarek and Bass tried to escape. Unluckily for everyone in the room, but luckily for the rest of humanity, Moron A was excommunicated from the gene pool via blunt force impact by a mushroom using the door as a sword.
Using a door as a sword, not a shield this time.
As Bast and Sarek began to run from the building using the rooftops, an artillery barrage began on the ruins of Three Rivers, followed by an aerial attack and then another prolonged artillery barrage. The Imperial Guard was back, baby, and it came in blasting. Our two boys, Bast and Sarek, however, were in the firing line. Bast and Sarek escaped from the rooftops into the sewers, and just at the point where they climbed out to escape the town itself, which was currently being shelled into a parking lot, shots rang out in the dark. Sarek got dropped before a very human voice called a ceasefire. A guardsman came out of the dark, leading a tank group. Bass stood in shock as he looked down at his dead friend. The guardsman laughed, noticing the tattoo on Sarek's head, and he knew what it signified. It signified that Sarek was a psyker. Bass decided since the guardsman thought needless death was funny, he'd tell a joke of his own and promptly shanked the guardsman. Yarrick was trying to kill him and was only stopped by a rifle butt to the head. As he lay on the ground, another figure came out of the dark. Speaking in a voice that reminded Bast of his grandfather, he addressed the guardsman, and then he stepped into the light. A scarlet sash hung on his waist, covered only by the greatcoat he wore. His head was crowned by a pointed hat. Bast had never seen a commissar. The commissar immediately recognized what Bast being alive, his appearance and all, actually signified, and was impressed. When the commissar asked for his name, he almost gave his family name, which was Varden, his father's name. But he stopped. He looked down at the blood-slicked knife in his hand, his grandfather's knife. That old man had made him what he was, and he would carry that name for the rest of his life. And for the first time, he spoke his name aloud. Sebastian Yarrick. Yarrick impressed the commissar so much that the commissar opted to nominate him for enrollment at the Scola Progenium, and while he was there, he met a friend in the form of Dominic Seroff. Dominic was a complete...
Also, just a little thing for those who may not know. Becoming a commissar or via the Scola Progenium is quite a task because as in the Scola, if you're great at combat, then you can become a Tempesta Scion, and if you're great at strategy and tactics, then you could become a general. Well, if you are of great faith, Ethan, and pious, then, if I remember correctly, you end up getting sent to the Ministorum. But you need to be all three to become a commissar.
edgelord and inducted Yarrick into his edgelording ways. Both of them were being a terror at the Scola to classmates and instructors alike, stopping just at the point where someone would say they were going to become wall decorations. You see, funny thing about the Scola, if you screw around enough where you piss off the instructors just enough, they'll cast you in resin while you're still alive. This does lend to a bit of a risk being caught being a little piece of crap and winding up with a Pikachu face permanently.
You're going in the walls.
At some point before he graduated, he learned the Orcish language from a man who had fought the Orcs before and had become their prisoner. Both Seraph and Yarrick were trained as Imperial Stormtroopers, and if you don't know, Imperial Stormtroopers are about as elite as you can get without a suit of power armor and a bunch of organs being jammed into your body, and they aren't far behind Space Marines at all levels, honestly. After a few years being the cream of the crop, they decided to take the whole I'm a dude bro thing to a whole new level. They both decided at the same time that being a commissar would be just frickin' dandy, and excelled at the training and discipline aspect. Both of them got their sashes that marked them as commissars under the tutelage of Lord Commissar Rasp. Within days of them getting their sashes, they were dispatched to the 77th Mortisian Infantry Regiment and sent to the local world of Memphis. Yarrick learned quite a lot from Rasp, namely the importance of making a banging speech and understanding political maneuverings. They were on Memphis to put down a rebellion involving a local lord, and did it with gusto until suddenly chaos. Yarrick's first battle as a commissar involved massacring
And suddenly chaos. Ah, what timing for a chaos cult to have reached the point where they felt that they could operate more openly.
a bunch of edgelord cultists, and everything was going smashingly until a literal defiler walked out of a keep and instantly one-shot the leader of the Imperial Army.
Oh yeah, if I remember correctly, Defilers are those demon engines that walk around on four legs, have the two claw arms, and are fitted with, let's see, flamer, either I think it was auto cannons on the side, and an artillery style gun in the center. I rather like Defilers. There's in the Dawn of War games, actually. Very versatile. Fun to watch as they tear through things.
This had upsides and downsides. One, Yarrick got to be a part of killing a defiler, which was no mean feat. Secondly, the new leader of the army didn't have the same attitudes as the first. The first general had an attitude of show up, issue beatdown, and leave. The new one wanted to make sure that everything was all good in the hood, which meant they weren't going anywhere. Well, here's the thing about the planet they were on. Memphis' political landscape was a problem. Some characters in fiction have a nemesis, others have a string of enemies that share a common theme. For some reason, Yarrick seems to have a particular problem with oversized creatures who have a lot of power and a complete disregard for the cost of their own ambition.
Wait, larger than average for their species, had an immense amount of power, was the head of some organization, willing to throw their power around for no reason, suffers from apparent brain damage. The suffers from apparent brain damage is making me imagine that they may be cornate. Whoever was leading the chaos in the area was either that or it was political landscape, yeah. In which case, probably some inbred noble who's a complete idiot, like Hermann von Straub.
Because before he met Hermann von Straub on Armageddon, before he came face to face with Gazgul, he met Cardinal Wagenheim of Mistra. You see, Waldersheim was committing wholeheartedly to, quote, furthering the interest of the ecclesiarchy, and, quote, rooting out heresy, and, quote, protecting the God Emperor's realm. Now I will translate those last three statements into what he was actually doing. Cardinal Chunky was abusing his power to tie the nobility into a position where they would either have had to fight back or simply cease to exist, destabilizing the planet both politically and economically, and making little to no secret that he was doing this because he felt like there was nothing they could do to stop him.
Oh no! So basically, he did the same kind of dumb thing, in that was the reason why the Emperor didn't want anyone to know about what he was doing with the Webway project then, and putting nobles in a position where they'd either lose all their power, or if they don't do something, or they do something, and that something is open rebellion.
The fat-ass father of his holy church did everything in his sizable, both figurative and literal power to provoke a civil war, all the while using the events that were happening that he provoked, mind you, to force the hand of the Imperial Guard, an Inquisitor, and a contingent of the Adeptus Sororitas to take his side. Literally everyone planet-side saw right through what he was doing, but he had handled the situation in such a way that any outsider looking from the outside in, with no context, would just see a cardinal doing his job. In the meantime, he unveiled the holy relic had been recovered and declared there was going to be a big flashy parade. He then, using the fact the rebellion that had just been crushed was led by a noble, promptly lowered the boomhammer on the nobility with downright insulting demands. He then followed this all up by claiming that not supporting these demands meant that surely, absolutely, they were on the side of the heretics and not the church. I'm not a betting man, but literally everyone who had 2 neurons firing knew what was gonna happen at that parade, and surprise, surprise, it went from 0 to 100 at hypersonic velocity, with multiple bombs leading the guard under Rask's command having to commit a literal massacre to stop the population from tearing itself apart in near panic. High Priest Lord Farmer had found out about a cult on his planet and had manipulated everything past that point to use them to gain more power for himself. Bad for him, the Cardinal of the Dairy Queen Diocese seemed to have forgotten that he was the highest ranking figure of the God Emperor's church on the planet. He didn't really recognize a problem, but, he figured it out real quick. You see, when you literally give free reign to a cult whose end goal is to destroy your church, and you're the head of the church, you're going to have to find out real quick that you have a massive target on the 30-pound melon you call a head. He seems to have forgotten that. Well, the cult didn't. In what was no more or less pure poetry, Bishop Busty found that he committed a FAFO order of the 8th degree as the entire city became, in layman's terms, an abject hellhole. The leader of the PDF had turned traitor.
So he... that is double funny then, in the whole empowering a bunch of cultists who want to destroy the institution that gives him his power, as well as head of said institution on the planet, that just so that he can gain more power. Which, well, manipulating things is a smart idea, for gaining power, but considering what he was doing to empower the people who wanted to kill him, perhaps going out in person on a parade may not have been the best idea.
The guard was ambushed at literally every turn, and Lord Commissar Rasp himself was taken captive. To firmly illustrate the point of how intensely Cardinal Cupcake had screwed up, the cultists were so ingrained with the nobility at that point that a large portion of the artillery that the local manufactorums had produced had been hidden away. After hearing one too many hymns, the cultists had pulled them out and decided to sing the Cardinal the song of their people. They promptly leveled the base of the 77th and 110th Regiments of the Mortizian Imperial Guard. All armor, all air power, vanished in a single stroke. After that opening hymn was concluded, they turned the Earthshakers and Basilisk onto the city itself. Waddleheim, given that he was an avid follower of Saint Swissroll, the patron saint of Little Debbie, he had apparently thought the world was a cake and tried to take a huge bite, only finding out mid-chomp that he had bitten into a landmine. So let's do a recap of Father Fatboy's follies. He had provoked an entire social-economic group that controlled a large amount of wealth and manpower into literal heresy because he was too much of a bastard not to step on a neck that he was allowed by law to step on. He had used a cult that he knew existed to further his goals, all the while dismissing literally everything that could point him in the general direction of how bad he was screwing up. He hilariously overestimated his own control of the situation while overwhelmingly dismissing the hornet's nest he was poking at, and the hornet's nest that had gotten his hands on a ton of artillery and were now actively sieging and shelling the entire city.
Yeah, a hornet's nest that he may as well have also decided to uh, feed a mixture of sugar water and growth hormones, given how horrendously that turned out.
Prior to the beginning of this siege, we saw how Commissar Yarrick was performing in the field, but damn man, what an absolute legend. He was the commissar of a company of men under command of Captain Saltern, whose field experience can best be described as non-existent. Yarrick could have, about 30 times over, pulled his sidearm and flat out executed or at the very least relieved him of command, and he actually thought about doing it. He didn't, because even though Saltern was hesitant, he was actually honest, and he wasn't stupid enough to get himself or his men needlessly killed. In short, Yarrick recognized the potential in him, without ever alerting the men that their captain was second-guessing and doubting himself.
So basically, he, he the guy had issues in command because of his indecisiveness due to the whole thing of not having confidence, but at least he wasn't a scumbag, because hearing about an officer being honest and not, say, trying to throw people under the bus to cover up their own mistakes and stuff like that, it honestly seems like something of increasing rarity at times. Like, the more I hear about various leaders in the Imperium.
Yarrick essentially taught the captain how to lead and how to project confidence in front of the men. While the captain was completely out of his depth, Yarrick appreciated the fact he could actually acknowledge it and silently insisted the captain convey Yarrick's recommendations as the captain's personal initiatives. Yarrick guided Saltern, mentored him, and made sure the men under Saltern's command never once saw it. These are not the actions of a glory hound. These are the actions of a commissar by writ and measure, fulfilling his oaths and his duty to the absolute best of his ability. In the middle of the artillery barrage, he was literally standing up while everyone else was laying down, mocking the cultists that were currently shelling them, and literally face-tanking high explosive rounds close by without flinching, with his only thought not to be taken off of his feet. In fact, multiple times he stood ready to face-tank literally anything for the sole reason that he felt like he needed to be the symbol his men could strive towards. Yarrick is built different. He was such an unrelenting force that his guardsmen not only stood up in the face of an artillery barrage, but started charging the wall of the city to take defensive positions. Once he got there, he recommended they investigate the tunnels underneath the city, and everyone thought it was a great idea. And they thought it was such a great idea he should go himself. He was investigating that with Colonel Benniger in the company of the 117th Armored Regiment, but considering all the armor that the regiment had been shelled straight to hell, well, technically it was the 117th Infantry Regiment at that point. What was happening while
Also, I give Yarrick a lot of respect for the fact that him leading by example shows that he won't tell his soldiers to do something that he would not himself be willing to do.
Yarrick was doing this, well, carnal corpulence was voiding his bowels at a level that shouldn't have been physically possible. By this point, the pious piggy had been squealing so loud that literally everyone knew he was a complete coward. When a sister superior feels the need to tell you, as a cardinal, that you aren't the center of the universe, and she doesn't care if you die, you have entered new ground. Speaking of same-said sister superior, her name is Sethera. She's very important later, but right now, you just need to know 3 things. Number 1, she's an absolute Amazon. Number 2, she remains consistently 2...
Wait, 6'13". Wait, wouldn't that just make her 7'1" then? She can and will murder you. Grimalda Sigma energy detected.
seconds from capping the Cardinal. And number 3, she has Grimaldus level shaming tactics. So how was Yarrick doing? Swimmingly! One of the...
I wonder if she was able to shame a dead person into coming back to life then, like Grimaldus did.
Filer literally stomped up from the ground. Colonel Benniger and Yarrick had a disagreement. Apparently the good colonel had an issue with attacking armor without armor and wanted to retreat. Yarrick told him that they weren't going to retreat, and he needed to lead his men. Vinegar disagreed, said they were retreating, and Yarrick decided that Colonel Vinegar needed to be a little bit more open-minded, so he helped out the good colonel with a bolt round through the head.
Definitely, he ended up more open-minded and, and opening his head up with a gyrojet propelled mini rocket. Also, so many horrible things could have been averted if more commissars were willing to deal with incompetent people like that. And by incompetent, I mean genuinely the kind of incompetent people that you can't really do anything about to fix them. They're just horrendous, and there's no turning that around. Like, Hermann von Straub.
Then he grabbed a jetpack, jumped out of the window, solo killed the defiler, and only stopped afterwards so a guardsman could retrieve a wheelbarrow to cart around his damn balls!
They were the biggest nuts she had ever seen.
Yarrick, of course, had some explaining to do, for while
Also, isn't that like the second defiler he's actually managed to bring down by this point by himself? That's an achievement, bringing down a demon engine single-handedly twice. And he's not, and again, he's not a space marine or anything like that. He's just a guy, granted, one who's been trained as probably as close to martial perfection as a human can get without being augmented, but still.
Commissars are usually cleared to delete active service entries. They better have a really good reason to do it. His punishment, it wasn't really a punishment. It was more of a thing. Hey, you go do this. Oh, you're doing this because I shot the colonel. Oh yeah, haha, go. Now Yarrick was the Imperial Guard's diplomatic liaison. But first he had to hold the wall against a literal tide of heretics who more and more began to look like they were of the Zenchian variety. Once the sun rose, he got his comeuppance for blasting the commanding officer of the 117th. A diplomatic between himself, Cross the Inquisitor, a Sister Superior, the Adeptus Sororitas who was really tall, and Grand Bishop Backflaps. After what was just about the most unproductive meeting ever, he stepped outside and was confronted by a bunch of his guardsmen. You see, one of his guardsmen was beginning to display an uncanny ability to figure out where bad stuff was and where it was coming from, and the other guardsmen were beginning to catch on that Private Lassie there was a very special boy.
Psyker. And he's getting visions of the future.
In other words, Yarrick had an unsanctioned psyker on his hands. Luckily for everyone involved, the unsanctioned psyker wasn't doing what you'd expect, i.e. trying to murder everyone in a 5-mile radius.
Or spewing demons out everywhere.
Private Lassie was built different. He had Biggie as my homie tattooed on his right arm. Private Lassie let them know that something bad was 12 seconds from going down in the Ecclesiarchal Palace. Sure enough, when Yarrick got down there, he had an absolute party waiting on him with cultists in a pink car. What a blast! Sister Superior Sethros showed up with a whole bunch of sisters that applied bolters to problems. This changed everything for the sisters, who up until this point were grudgingly staying by Cardinal Cheesecake Factory and had more than enough reason now to go out and chase the people who were summoning literal demons. Waldenheimer with cheese squealed like the piglet he was, telling them that they were there to protect him. Our Lady of the Verbal Backhand informed him that to his own surprise, he wasn't the most important thing in the Imperium.
For the second time, which when you get told that by the people who you thought you were commanding, not once but twice, to me that says something a lot about him as well, considering he needed to be told a second time.
Yarrick decided the best course of action was going forth to commit the Great Train Robbery, and using the munitions train coming to resupply the army besieging the city as a literal Tsar Bomba to wipe out the heretics sieging it. Sneaking out of the city using a tunnel network, Yarrick, Sethero, and a hand-selected group of guardsmen boarded the train, took it over, rigged it for maximum speed, and when the happy heretics were getting ready to be resupplied, they promptly all got their munitions, promethium, and reinforcements delivered them at bullet train velocity. The entire heretic army was almost instantaneously obliterated. Unfortunately, the Grand Poobah heretic hadn't wagered everything on a siege. He had somehow gotten his hands on a Death Strike missile. Typically, a heretic getting his hands on a missile that can level literally everything in a 10-mile radius is a bad sign. Typically, you want to avoid this happening as much as possible. Well, when...
part of me also says that the reason that this heretic was able to get their hands on such ordnance, aside from the fact that, the idiot cardinal was empowering them, and for as long as he was, is also because these are Zinchian heretics. So I imagine, that there were a lot of fun plans going on behind the scenes.
Cardinal Clogged Artery was putting together his master plan of pissing off the whole world. He hadn't considered even remotely monitoring anything. And considering he not only missed out on the fact that the cult had turned into a literal army and equipped itself as it did, he certainly wasn't making sure to check the manifest to make sure that something wasn't sneaking little boy and fat man's edgelord grandchild around. Yarrick didn't even know what was coming, but whatever it was causing Private Lassie quite a bit of the problems in the not having a seizure department.
Hey, look, it's Private Lassie. Why is he shaking? What's that, Lassie? Tell us. There's a fire coming from the sky? Stop sweating so much. What's that? We need to get the hell out of here right now?
The regiments of the guard decided it was a good time to get with the sisters and get out of town, and they did so with gusto, leaving Cardinal Chunky behind all by himself in the city, with a bunch of ecstatic to be alive civilians. Now I could lie and say that the Cardinal decided this would be a humbling experience, but we all know what happened next. Promptly claiming responsibility for literally everything, the Cardinal got up in front of the masses and started extolling all of his absent virtues. Until he noticed the trail of fire in the sky. Well,
pictures taken moments before disaster.
At least we don't have him around anymore. The blast wave threw even the Sister Superior Sethro off her feet in full power armor, and they were at a place where they were literal kilometers away from the furthest wall of the city. So, the destruction was, to be blunt, comprehensive. Plus side, the entire place smells like bacon! Yay! The remaining forces headed to face the final boss of the heretic army, with the entire force beginning to head toward the PDF commander's keep. The commander himself hadn't exactly been idle though, and it turns out he was really tanking as much of the hard stuff, and by hard stuff I mean human sacrifices, as he could get his hands on. So much so that he literally knew what the army coming for him was going to do. Zinch. He laid an ambush for them, promptly threw the entire thing into disarray, and sat back doing the evil Wario laugh up until one of his own sewer grates popped open, and Lassie led the way for Yarrick, as well as the sisters. The PDF commander, even though he was suddenly in possession of a brand new sword by way of impalement from Yarrick, wasn't quite done yet. As his soul was being evicted from his body, he welcomed a new renter. This renter just happened to be a herald of Zinch. Now, I'm not gonna bother telling you how bad of a situation it is when a fully fledged demon of Zinch just shows up, but if what Yarrick was going through before in this fight was comparable to being kicked in the testicles by a child, this new development was somewhere on the level of being kicked in the testicles by Chun-Li on bath salts. The herald grabbed hold of Yarrick.
By the way, considering the sorceries at the disposal of Heralds of Zinch and Lords of Change, when one of them pops up, it's always a fun time. Lots of colorful flames and rampant mutation.
And when it did, Yarrick's mind flooded with visions of the future that would be revealed to him if he would only look. Yarrick flatly refused, doing everything in his power to block out the sights the Herald was trying to show him, but the shadows still made it through. Yarrick felt a shadow pain in his right arm. He saw hulking shadows moving in dust, and a dull pain in his left eye. In the haze he made of his mind, he saw a hulking shadow, possessing an intellect and malice greater than he could have imagined. Finally, he felt a monster's jaws on his right arm. Yarrick isn't apparently a fan of fortune tellers, because he unloaded a few shells right into the Herald's face. Of course, this pissed off the Herald to no end, but right there to give the creature something else to pay attention to was Sister Superior Sethano.
Also, this is why it is that, generally speaking, if you think that someone's in the process of being possessed by a demon, it's generally good to make sure they're well and truly dead before the demon can fully manifest. Because demons, if allowed to fully manifest, as I've heard, are they can take an entire bolter clip to go down, and that's just and that's it's like, and that can be for even lesser demons. Well, lesser in terms of, things like bloodletters.
Unlike Yarrick, when the Herald grabbed her, she actually looked. This had consequences. The day was saved when the Herald of Zinch got excommunicated from existence by Yarrick, the sisters, and Private Lassie, who went Kamehameha and understandably was trying not to lose his mind. It was only after, and I mean only after, Private Lassie saved everyone multiple times over and solved the case and helped the mission that the Inquisitor actually began to try to lecture people on why Lassie was a bad dog. The Inquisition, pissing on a gift horse any time it presents itself, only after using it until its use has run its course, of course. Private Lassie was taken to a black ship.
Given the things that Inquisitors do regularly, I do still maintain that it takes you have to be a special kind of asshole at times to be an Inquisitor. Given the things that they keep doing.
Sister Superior Sethano had PTSD from being shown all possible futures by the Herald of Zinch and actually looking. Yarrick saved Lord Commissar Rasp only to execute him later, and the Colonel with a city of millions got wiped out by a plasma bomb. All in a good day's work for the good old IG. Even on his first mission, Yarrick...
For the Imperial Guard, given the casualties they generally take, lose a few thousand, and, well, that's just normal.
Yarrick was not only resilient but monstrously slow, overcoming injuries and dealing with stupidity so painful they bordered on the extreme. By the midpoint of the campaign, his soldiers were following him, not because he told them to, they followed him because they wanted to. Yarrick was the symbol that he was striving to be, standing in the street while hell rained down from the sky, buildings exploding all over him while he walked calmly toward his next objective. Yarrick never once hesitated to be where the fighting was the thickest. He never let a possibility to be an example pass him by, and not once did he do it to grandstand. Not once did he do it to seek praise or recognition from his superiors. Yarrick did it because it was what he was supposed to do, and what he could do, even if he was...
Also, so I can hear his voice dying.
So beaten and bruised, moving made him want to pass out. He didn't stop when he was hurt. He stood in spite of it, refusing to allow his troopers to even see him display the slightest sign of discomfort, pain, or dismay. On repeat, in his own minds, were the words, "Be the example," and that he was, all the while saying he would never be the perfect example. Well, I want you to find a guardsman under his command that didn't think he was just that. Irony presented itself when the Mortisian regiments were relieved on the world by the 252nd Armageddon Steel Legion, the very regiment that Yarrick would himself lead almost 150 years later.
It takes also a special kind of person to instill, or rather, to inspire people to that degree, where they will willingly follow you into what to many people would look like the jaws of certain death. Because again, the things that the Imperial Guard fight on the daily are just ludicrous. But as always, that is a fun watch. If you guys haven't, again, totally check out Old Man's channel. He makes really great content, and he definitely It shows that he definitely put a lot of work into this. Also, so hope he was able to get some rest after he did this about 2 months ago. But I hope you all enjoyed it watching with me. And if you did, I'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. But that's all for tonight. Ta-ta, everyone. Until next time.